You know, I just love our state's marine highway system. We're blessed with the Washington State ferries. They carry millions of people every year back and forth across Puget Sound, and they serve almost every county in western Washington. For some people, the ferry system is just a way to get to work. For others, it's a place to bring their cousins from out of town who are visiting and want to show them something beautiful here in Washington State. For some, it's a lifeline to medical services off their island or needed hospital visit. The history of the ferry system is varied. There was a wide variety of vessels, private competitors, serving different routes up and down Puget Sound. When the state bought the system in the 1950s, they found themselves with an assortment of old boats from diesels all the way back to steam. Now we have modern, efficient new ferries being constructed for the benefit of our citizens. Sometimes I hear complaints about the ferry system. Maybe a boat's not on time or it was overloaded, but you never hear a complaint when the boat has to wait for an ambulance from one of the distant islands. Everyone knows that they could be the one in the back of that ambulance someday. Washington State ferries are truly one of my favorite places.
Welcome everybody to our first press availability of this, what I think is going to prove to be very challenging session. We have some really challenging headwinds from the federal government, and I mentioned this in my speech yesterday, that are challenging in terms of just our ability to deliver health care, food, housing to Washingtonians. You know, you've got 300,000 Washingtonians right now who've lost subsidies. We've got another 180,000 Washingtonians who are going to lose health care within a few months. We have 900,000 Washingtonians whose ability to access food is challenged by the federal government. We have federal governments that's revoking energy credits here in Washington, and on and on and on. I guess I will just say that I have heard that my Republican colleagues across the aisle were not that happy with the tone that I set yesterday, and I think I should get this out of the way right now. From now till the last day of session, this is the tone you will see, and now it's a signing guide for me. As long as we have a federal government that is attacking Washingtonians left and right, and that is affecting our ability to provide services for the people of this state, this is the thing that we are going to spend our energy this session fighting against, and what we are going to try to fight for is to help Washingtonians stand against federal overreach, try to help people on health care, on food, on housing, to help our students, and we have a short 60-day session, and that's what all of our energy is going to be spent on. So I think some of the bills that you see us hearing this week and the work that you'll see us doing in the budget is exactly that.
Good afternoon, everyone. Monica Tamer, Deputy Majority Leader of the Washington State Senate. Excited to be here for our first press avail, joined by Majority Leader Senator Peterson. And I will echo a lot of what Speaker Jickens has said. In the Senate, we will be focused for all Washingtonians. We're going to be working on ensuring that our budget and our tax code is sustainable and fair. And we will be working on making sure each and every Washingtonian feels safe from the overreach of the federal government. People all across our state are suffering because of decisions being made by one man who basically has no checks and balances on him at the federal level. We have people that are struggling with housing, with access to health care, to food, because of one man's actions. And in this Washington, we're going to make sure that no matter where you come from, how you identify, or who you are, that you feel protected. We live in a government structure where we always envisioned the federal government and state governments working together. But we are now in a situation where the federal government is outright attacking blue states. I was really pleased that we on Justice Committee just today had our hearing on the face covering bill. And this is when I tell you that the public is engaged. We had 14,000 people sign in pro on that bill in 2005. People in Washington want us to make sure that we are fighting the inhumane coming out of the federal government. And this session, we're going to be doing exactly that. Making sure that people in this Washington understand that we will be doing everything to make sure that they can thrive, that they can live, and that they understand that they are welcome in the state of Washington.
And thank you, Senator Dinker, for reminding me that I didn't introduce Majority Leader Joe Fitzgibbon, nor Floor Leader Monica Stonier in my opening comments. So we're here, and all of us, I think, are ready to answer questions.
Among those who testified against the face coverings bill this morning was Pete Serrano, the acting U.S. Attorney over in the Eastern District of Washington. He cited concerns for both public safety and law enforcement, and said that it wouldn't be enforceable against federal officials. Are you confident that that would apply to federal officers as well?
Is he still in office? No. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, he did testify, and Senator Valdez has done a really good job in the stakeholdering that he has done. You also heard from a local Thurston County person that their sheriff supports this bill. And so this is where we really have to figure out what is the purpose behind people hiding their faces. We heard from the Sexual Assault Law Center that this is something that survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault are so fearful. Because anyone wearing a mask can come and kidnap people off of our streets. And our law enforcement does not know how to react because they don't know who these people are. And so you're also going to have bills that talk about the ability to sell clothing that makes people look like ICE agents. But this is a huge safety risk for our law enforcement officers and for people on our streets because they're simply being kidnapped. And we're just assuming that people have some legal authority to do this, but we have no idea because no one knows who these individuals are. They're not showing legal documentation. And I can tell you that in my district, yesterday and the day before, there's been ICE activity in Redmond, and people are greatly concerned because we expect our law enforcement officers to follow the rule of law. And our federal agents in the last few weeks have really shown that they are out there violating people's rights and, in fact, shooting people in scenarios that are very, very alarming to see. So absolutely we need to make sure that in this Washington, we are making sure that everyone feels safe. And that includes the law enforcement officers that are going to have to decide how to respond when someone with a mask is kidnapping someone off of our streets. I'm just so passionate about this.
On the income tax proposal, is there consensus, so at least among the folks sitting here, on the basic elements of that bill being the 9.9% tax on adjusted gross income over $1 million? Or is there still discussion about even those basic elements taking place?
I think that Representative Fitzgibbon and I, who will be the prime sponsors of the bills in each chamber,
have agreement on the mechanics of the tax. We're still waiting to see a draft of that part of the bill, and then we'll engage over the next few weeks in some pretty extensive stakeholdering about that. But the basics, I think we've come to agreement on in terms of how the tax would be imposed.
Just to make sure I'm hearing you right, so that sounds like the 9.9% or
9.9% million on income over $1 million. Not including capital gains income.
That's all locked in, you would say at this point. Okay.
I want to ask Speaker Jenkins and Senator Peterson, you both got letters from the Citizen Action Defense Fund demanding that the initiatives be heard during session or brought to a floor vote as required by the state constitution.
That isn't what's required by the state constitution. Jackson is just not correct.
I don't remember them sending a letter about Initiative 502 or the many other initiatives to the legislature that didn't receive hearings, so I guess this is different.
Well, the citizens that signed them certainly would anticipate that the legislature would bring them up for public hearings.
The citizens who signed them anticipated that either the legislature would take action or the people would get a chance to vote, and the people would get a chance to vote.
So your assertion is that the Washington State Constitution does not require that these be brought up for hearing or to a floor vote.
It
You're saying
We
the
never
Constitution
heard
doesn't
that
do
assertion until 2 years ago.
No, that wasn't my question.
There-
I'm not
we-
saying that's not there.
That is not what the Constitution requires. Nobody's ever said that's what the Constitution requires until 2024.
I would just say that those who assert it actually, instead of cherry picking a word from the Constitution, they need to actually read the Constitution. The Constitution itself anticipates the legislature taking no action. That phrase is actually in the Constitution. And sending it to the voters, right? We have a long history of initiatives to the legislature in this state, over 20 of them over the last 35 years. Well over half of them never had hearings. So to bring this up out of the blue is, again, I guess maybe an interesting political move, but it's not actually grounded in our Constitution or in the history of the operations of the legislature.
So these two initiatives aren't going to get hearings this session? Is that
No,
what
they'll
you're
go to the voters, and both of the however many campaigns there are out there on these will have the chance to make their case to voters.
And by the way, that's assuming that they're certified, because I think one of the things that we've started to hear from the Secretary of State's office is that, notwithstanding the very precise sounding numbers that the campaign claimed to bring, the boxes that they had mixed up petitions from each initiative mixed in the same box, and that the Secretary of State's office had to spend the first 2 days just sorting the papers to figure out which one was which. So how the campaign ever came to the conclusion that there were 400 whatever thousand signatures on one and on the other, I don't know, because it doesn't appear that way from the organization with which the signatures were presented to the Secretary of State.
I have questions for both senators. Senate Bill 5926, which would have expanded the public records exemption that Senator Wellman had said came forward because of stakeholder concerns over the privacy and safety of child care providers in non-residential settings. Republicans had argued that it would hinder the gathering of facts, withholding information from the public. It sounds like that bill is not going to get a hearing, according to Senator Wellman's office. Can either of you explain why it won't get a hearing?
I will tell you I have not tracked that bill. I don't believe that's been referred to my committee, but I can look into that. That wasn't on my radar.
Do you believe that these are regulations, these are records that should get more sunshine or less sunshine?
I have no idea what that bill says, so I will have to get back to you. We're day 2 of session. So if her office has said she's not seeking a hearing, I'm inclined to believe her. But that is not a bill that's been referred to Law and Justice.
I know the House Speaker was very defiant on Friday, talking about any sort of allegations of fraud. There are also allegations of records getting deleted from state websites. Have either of you heard anything about the deletion of records from state websites as it pertains to child care centers?
I think the
That
only
seems to be
thing-
an expertise that the federal government has, not us. I mean, we can always look at those things, but that is something that the federal government is doing over and over and over again. I find these allegations in Washington State, listen, people who just raise the issue of fraud when they have actually no substance behind what it is they're saying. We have so many checks, and I mean, if you look at the number of audits that have been being done by DCYF in childcare, it's extraordinary. Now, one of the things that's most important to remember is that every Washingtonian, every family who's getting childcare deserves the right to have high quality childcare in this state. And if there are allegations, we have multiple systems in this state. Everything from the audits and the investigations that are done by DCYF to our state auditor to the Joint Legislative Audit Review Committee. We have lots of opportunities for that. But for people to go out and knock on the door of child care centers and demand to see kids, I was just having to calm down Representative Stonier about what would have happened if somebody did that with regard to her children. It's a little bit, it just seems like it's scraping the bottom of the barrel to just raise random allegations of fraud. Now, we want to hear about real allegations with some substance behind them about what people think it is. But this is creating a huge lack of safety in our state, and this is one of the reasons why you see all these requests for public records exemptions, is because of the safety concerns that are raised by individuals going out and just attacking or engaging with somebody in a highly inappropriate way. Sorry for interrupting.
Oh, no,
And I would add that these are small businesses that are operating in our neighborhoods, in our communities, and when you have parents dropping off and picking up babies and toddlers in a situation where there are folks out there demanding to see documentation that ought to be covered by regulators in our state, this state has for a long time invested in, cared about, and even passed a revenue source to ensure that families in this community have access to childcare and early learning opportunities for their children. So yeah, we certainly do take seriously whether or not those dollars are going to that high quality care. We've invested in that, talked about it for years. But I certainly do not want anybody thinking that they can go knocking on a child care center, talking to the people who are caring for those children outside of the regulations that we have in place already, especially given the environment we're in right now. We just got done talking about people getting kidnapped off the streets. Are we serious here? If there's concern, we'll bring them up. We have an independently elected auditor that can look into those kinds of things. And we see that solved over and over again.
Well, with all due respect, as one of the reporters who did some door knocking, never demanding to see a child. If anybody demanding to see a kid, that would be highly unusual, I don't think.
I'm glad you agree with that.
Right, and that never happened, that I'm aware of, even all the stuff posted online. But when you do knock on a door that's a taxpayer-subsidized child care center that's received hundreds of thousands of dollars over a couple of months' time, there's no evidence of a child care center. As a reporter, I have every right to knock on that door and say, you're getting a heck of a lot of money. Are you actually watching kids? And you've got all
My
places.
2 kids went to an in-home child care center. The woman who ran it is still to this day called Grandma Cindy by my kids in their
My kids
20s.
at the home care center too.
There's not a lock. There's not a gate going up to that front door. All of the regulations in the back for keeping the kids safe is in place. But if you were knocking on that door and I found out about it, I would lose my mind. That is a home. That is a home where a business operates to care for toddlers.
If it's a taxpayer-subsidized daycare, we have every right to knock on the door and say, are you a legit operation?
The Department of
because if
Children,
they
Youth, and
are-
Families audits all of them every year. Did you report that to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families?
Right.
Or did you write a story about it?
They have performed audits and the findings have not been acted upon. That I have reported on.
So when you went and knocked on a in-home family child care center, did you report that there was nobody there to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families?
That there was no one from DCYF there?
No, that there was. You said that there was no daycare going on there.
Right, there was no daycare there.
And did you report that to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families so they could
Absolutely.
follow up?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I look forward to hearing that because they audit every child care center every year, and they haven't found the instances of the kind of fraud that has been alleged.
I think, Carlene, what my point is You may have the right to do that. It's not right to do that. We have systems in Washington State that people should report fraud to. At the same time, that all of this is going on, we have people being scooped up off of the street. We have a former speaker in Minnesota who opened the door to what she thought was a law enforcement agent, which was somebody dressed up.
I think those
And
are totally
wasn't.
different.
And
It's
I get
totally
that you,
different.
I get that you think it's different, and now she's dead. She's been assassinated. So it is right for people to be concerned about those they don't know coming to their home, knocking on their door, asking to see things. It's right for that concern to happen, and it's also right for any time someone has a concern about fraud or abuse happening in a child care center to report it to DCYF, to report it to a legislator, to report it to the state auditor. There are a lot of options for reporting and auditing in this state, and that's the way that things should be operating.
And I want to be very clear. People in their private homes have a right not to open their front door, especially to people they don't recognize.
Of course.
And I can't tell you how many times in the last year I have said, please don't let the facts get in the way of your opinions. And I think we are responsible if we actually make sure we're following the facts in this state and not what is happening and being politicized in the rest of the country. That is how we make sure we govern appropriately and responsibly, is when we're actually following the facts.
I would really hate to see our work go backwards by having fewer in-home child care centers by high-quality providers because they find it's going to be expensive to put up fences and walls and cameras to ensure that the people who are coming to their location are either the families who are supposed to be there or the state regulators who are supposed to be there.
And we have
That would be an
immigrants-
increased cost that I don't think we could handle.
And we have immigrants that are providing in-home care. And if people in this state don't recognize how scary it is right now for immigrants, there are people I know who don't leave their house without their passport and ID. Can you imagine that in this America? That you have to carry your ID to prove you're a citizen if you go for a walk or a run? Everyone should be appalled and shocked. So yes, having a random person knock on someone's door and expecting them to open the door is completely unacceptable in today's climate.
And Speaker, just to follow up on what you were saying about the deletion of records, there's been a filing in Thurston County by your colleague on the Republican side, Jim Walsh, alleging that records have been deleted from state websites. Are you aware of any sort of records getting deleted from state websites?
I'm not aware, and the GOP chair says a lot of things and files a lot of things. So I mean, we'll see. He's perfectly entitled to do that, and I'm not aware of that, and we'll have to see what the circumstances are, if any, surrounding it.
Back to the budget. Before the session, the governor had stated that he would like to balance things out with cuts and not raising taxes. Said something similar before the previous session, only to sign the biggest tax increase in state history. With the talk of a tax on high-income earners, is the idea of balancing the budget on cuts alone just a non-starter here? Or?
What the governor has said, which I don't think is different than anything that we've said, is that the 25-27 budget, which our constitutional assignment is to pass a balanced budget, to pass a supplemental budget, operating, capital, and transportation, but that operating in particular is where the focus tends to be, that needs to be a balanced budget. And there's not a revenue option on the table that would involve bringing in more money to the state general fund or the state operating budget that could help with our 25-27 problem. What we have also said, and what the governor has also said, is that we need to engage in tough conversations around deeper structural tax reform that can put us on a sustainable trajectory in future biennia. So I think that what he's said and what we've said are pretty aligned on that.
So cuts alone is not the agenda, or
cuts alone is the path that we are, the only path before us for the 25-27 budget. Any new revenue option would not come in until the subsequent biennium. And, I think that will be important for us to talk about. But the task before us right now is to balance the 25-27 budget, and our plan and intention is to do that with reductions.
And I'll maybe disagree slightly with that by saying I agree wholeheartedly that there's none of the significant progressive revenue options that we've talked about that are being discussed will come in time to balance the budget.
Take several years.
Yes. There are some smaller revenue options that we have in front of us. For example, last year the Senate, as part of the sales tax bill, proposed increasing the cigarette tax. That could happen quickly, and it could happen in a way that could bring in money in time for the 25-27 biennium. Now, that doesn't mean that we have the votes on both sides to do that, or that there's been a plan, but it is absolutely possible that there could be some small things that would help with the current budget problem. Most of the problem is going to be solved with cuts and transfers.
I think with $2.3 billion, I mean, a cigarette tax isn't going to be
No, that would be $100 million
Yeah.
in the remainder of the biennium. But you could have a few of those things that could be part of the solution that helps get us out of here on time.
Yeah, I'll be more precise. Any general tax increase is not realistic
Yeah.
for the current biennium. The governor proposed closing 3 tax loopholes in his budget. I think those are reasonable proposals, and closing tax loopholes, I think should always be something that we take seriously. But I think the overall impact that makes on the budget situation for the 25-27 budget, is pretty small compared to the hill that we have to climb.
Aside from the budgetary issues and the talk of minor taxes here or longer term taxes on high income earners, what do you say to constituents who say the cost of living is just way too high here, whether it's from issues from the federal government and cutting back funding that comes to the state? But
I say that's exactly
exactly
why we need tax reform, right? The millionaire tax proposal is not only about increasing taxes on 20,000 people who have the capacity to shoulder more of the burden of state government. It's also about reducing taxes for millions of people who live here. And we haven't decided the precise mechanism for that. We know that it'll probably involve support for the Working Families Tax Credit, which is already out there reducing the tax burden for people. But it could involve property taxes or small business credit, as the governor has proposed. We absolutely intend that a significant portion of the millionaire tax will be returned to the vast majority of voters and help with affordability and reducing the tax burden for the people who, in our upside-down, broken tax system, are paying too much in taxes.
A lot of critics would say, it's fine to make the progressive tax code a little more progressive, raise taxes on higher incomes or higher earning businesses, but there's very little corresponding reductions on.
Well, I think
the
you're not hearing or not listening to what I'm saying. A significant portion of the $3.5 or $4 billion a year that we're going to be collecting, assuming that the tax passes, from people who have over $1 million in income, will be returned to the people of the state in the form of lowering more regressive taxes.
Specifically,
Property tax.
I think
property
that
taxes.
I don't think we
haven't
are going to tell you today what those options are, but yeah, that's part of our assignment in engaging in structural tax reform conversations is to rebalance the tax code, and some of that will include reductions. And I think as this proposal takes shape, you will see more about that.
I think, beyond this, what we're trying to do is figure out, the Trump tariffs are having the biggest effect on Washington State, but that doesn't mean we should really work hard on affordability issues that we can control. So, you're going to see bills trying to assure that the data center kind of explosion that we've seen in terms of growth, but also energy costs isn't borne out by individual consumers, that they're paying their way so that they're not affecting our energy costs. I think you'll continue to see us working on bringing down the costs of housing development, although we have passed over 25 bills on, addressing permitting and other slowdowns. over the last 5 years, but we'll continue to keep on working on those, so you'll see some of those. I expect you'll see us working really hard to protect Washingtonians' access to preventive services without co-pays, no matter what the federal government is doing to our health care costs. So these are all things that we're going to try to do, work on this year, and there are a lot of other things that we'll work on to try and help Washingtonians in terms of the affordability.
Drew has been very patient and polite.
What if the leader wanted to finish?
Well, just the biggest expenses in most households' budget. Number one is housing. Representative Taylor has a bill on condo liability, continuing work that she, Senator Peterson, Senator Dingra have done over the years to try to make condo construction more affordable. Healthcare affordability. Representative Levitt has a bill to ensure that flu vaccines are available at all hospitals in our state. That's an important preventative measure that can avoid significant health risks and costs, if people are taking preventative measures to avoid getting the flu. Transportation expenses, we're constantly working to try to make more transportation choices available because of the extreme expense of acquiring and owning a car, and childcare for families that have children. We've talked about childcare a fair amount, but those are the big things that most people are feeling the most. And on all of those issues, we have work underway to try to address those high costs.
Last question.
The governor wants to tap the rainy day fund for $1 billion for this current biennium's budget. I know last year your proposals, correct me if I'm wrong, differed. I think the House wanted to do that correct and the Senate did not. I know you're not showing all your cards right now, but will the rainy day fund be looked at? The treasurer has raised concerns about that idea for this session.
Yeah, so the initial House budget did not have the rainy day fund last year. The final budget that we all agreed on did not. I think it's too early to say what we're going to do with the budget stabilization account this year. I would say it feels like it's for times like this. So, I would be supportive of looking at that as a way to, avoid really significant impacts to Washingtonians in K-12 education or higher education or childcare or healthcare. So it's certainly, on the table.
And the constitutional amendment by which the voters approved the budget stabilization account specifically outlines what it means to be reigning and says that that's when employment growth is less than 1%. That's the situation that we're in right now because of the economic conditions that the Trump administration has wrought. So it is an appropriate time for us to be considering that as part of the short-term budget solution.
Just as an example, Drew, we're estimating, OFM is estimating that it'll be around $175, $180 million just this next year to implement all of the federal red tape that's required by H.R. 1 in order for us to get less money than we were getting before. And over 4 years, about $350 million. So that's like one-time money that we have to invest in IT systems and things like that to be able to better deny people food and health care, and that's required by the federal government. So, and that came with no money. So if we want to have Medicaid, if we want to get federal dollars for food, we have to do those things.
Thank you.